The Pittsburgh Pirates pitching staff was the best unit that the Pittsburgh Pirates had all season. How much better can it get?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of 4 years here on the Locked On Podcast Network and the Locked On Pirates podcast, bringing you all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans just like you. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Book today on Booking.com on the website or in the Booking.com app to go on vacation like your host Ethan Smith has. I've been enjoying Savannah while I'm down here. To all of my Florida friends, by the way, before we get today's show started, good luck to you. Be safe. And if you can leave, please leave. Hurricane Milton is not looking fun whatsoever. And let's just try not to lose lives, okay? Let's just try not to do that. But we are officially starting the 2024 player review series, and I was going to do individual shows about starting pitching. I was going to do Skeens, Jones, Falter, Ortiz. I was going to do all of them like individually, but I felt like as a group, I wanted to do these guys together because this is a unit in the starting pitching staff, folks, that has really become the best unit that the Pittsburgh Pirates have. We look at the bullpen and its struggles, and we'll talk about those tomorrow. We look at how hitting has just not taken the next step that it truly needs to take. But the starting pitching staff did take some steps forward this year. If we rewind to 2023 and go back and look at that starting pitching staff, you look at what they had. It was Mitch Keller, Johan Oviedo, and pretty much nothing else. I mean, there was nothing else really that was there that made anybody excited, and rightfully so, because sadly, those guys aren't even really here anymore. Now you fast forward to 2024, where you talk about Paul Skeens, who I awarded the Best Pitcher Award in the 2024 Player Awards that I did yesterday, so make sure you go check that out. You also had Jared Jones, who was a phenomenal rookie pitcher, and we'll get more into here in a moment. You had Mitch Keller, who you extended prior to the season beginning and really hammered away with him getting more consistent, getting more acclimated to a longer workload. And you saw that, but we'll talk about him today as well, because there were some things that I saw from Mitch Keller this year that I found very intriguing and worth talking about. And then you also had the surprises of Luis Ortiz and Bailey Falter, who really took command as back-end rotation options. And we'll talk about them too. But I wanted to start with Jared Jones, because with Jared Jones specifically, he did something that we rarely ever see from a pitcher in Pittsburgh. He found his way out of spring training onto the big league roster after 16 and a third scoreless innings with 15 strikeouts in Bradenton. And we all remember the amazing debut he had as well. He allowed 3 earned runs against the Miami Marlins, but struck out 10 Marlins across 5 2/3 innings. And that was really where the Jared Jones start kind of came. And that's where Jared Jones as a pitcher started to acclimate himself and even kind of take away some of the, some of the attention away from Paul Skeens, who was just very, very, very good. And you look at what he was able to do, folks, before he even got going. I mean, he was striking guys out with 100-mile-per-hour pitches, much like we saw with Paul Skeens. He was striking out guys at will. He was pitching deep into ball games, but the Pirates also understood that they had to take care of his innings. And one of the biggest things that we sadly had to see from Jared Jones was, of course, the lat strain that he suffered, which made him miss time from July 4th to August 27th. But he struggled even before going on the injured list. Like, that was where we were kind of starting to see those signs of fatigue appear for a guy like Jared Jones. That's where we were seeing signs of what was happening with Jared Jones, because we kind of forgot that he was a rookie pitcher with just how good he was pitching. And eventually he needed some time off, and it came with an injury. And even when he came back from that injury, he didn't pitch all that well either. He had a 5.06 ERA in September. And you look at the full sample, though, if you're going to get a 4.14 ERA and 121 and 2/3 innings from a former second round pick from 2020, you're going to take that, folks. That's what's going to happen. And even better, you get 132 strikeouts from Jared Jones, which ranked third on the roster behind Paul Skeens and Mitch Keller. And that was what you wanted to see. Now the expectation becomes, okay, let's raise the innings. Let's raise the strikeouts. Let's drop the ERA. Let's be more consistent. Let's be able to go into deep into ball games more often. And I think that's what you want to see from Jared Jones moving forward. And unlike Skeens, though, I think what was interesting about Jared Jones is he had more of a, what I would call, rookie campaign. You saw Jared Jones have his up and downs, and Paul Skeens had his ups and his downs as well. But Paul Skeens was just so phenomenally good that it just almost felt like even the downs were just too good. Like a down for Paul Skeens was him giving up 4 earned runs in a start, which for other pitchers could be a very good outing depending on where they stand and just how good they are. And for Jared Jones, you did see that happen. I mean, you were seeing times where at the end of times for him, right before he went on the injured list, he allowed 5 or more earned runs in 2 of his his last 4 starts before going on the injured list. So that was kind of what you were seeing from a guy like Jared Jones. You were seeing him struggle. You were seeing him have those rookie slumps. You were seeing him kind of hit the rookie wall and opposing hitters kind of figure him out. But Jared Jones still cemented himself as a future piece of this rotation, no doubt. And you want to hopefully see those signs of fatigue dissipate. You want to see Jared Jones really start to move forward and become kind of the Robin to Paul Skeens' Batman. That could also be a guy like Mitch Keller who could do very much of the same thing. Mitch Keller, obviously the numbers dipped for him this year, and post All-Star break was really where Mitch Keller was having issues. He had just 1 victory in 12 starts after the All-Star break, along with a 5.65 ERA, and his strikeout to walk ratio also dropped considerably. He had 105 strikeouts to 30 walks before the All-Star break, 61 strikeouts to 20 walks after the break. So you hate to see that stuff happen for Mitch Keller because Mitch Keller, of course, gets extended for some considerable money after becoming an All-Star in 2023, having his first home opener of his career, really turning his career on a full 180 from what we had seen from him. You saw glimpses of it in 2022, but 2023 was really the breakout for Mitch Keller, and I think that's what we like to see. But one of the biggest issues that I had with Mitch Keller this season, but why I still think he's a big part of the staff, is you saw his fastball run value dip considerably from 23 to 24. It went from +11 to +3, which was the biggest change in any run value on any type of his pitches that he had. Why is that important? Because Mitch Keller has 3 different fastballs that he throws, sometimes 4. So that is one of the more important pitches that he has. You just kind of saw a lack of command later in the season. You kind of saw a lack of him really placing the ball where he wanted it to be, placing it where it had to go. And you were also just kind of starting to see him slow down and stop taking advantage in games where he usually would. You were seeing him get put in situations where a runner was in scoring position or a runner was on third base with 2 outs. And normally what we had come accustomed to with Mitch Keller is that he was going to get out of those jams. And that's what made Paul Skeens so good. Mitch Keller, on the other hand, later in the season, we just weren't seeing it. And Mitch Keller was indeed a guy, like I mentioned before, that was an all-star candidate and rightfully should have made the game when you look at stats of other pitchers that did. But he just fell off the face of the earth after the All-Star break. But that does not mean that he, by any means, is not a part of this rotation, because you look at what he's done and what he was able to do, he still had very good numbers, folks. I mean, he still was very, very solid. He had a 4, where I was looking at it in my notes here. He still was able to have a 4.2 ERA. He was still consistent. He was still able to show flashes of that new Mitch Keller that we'd seen, and he's still going to be a massive part of this rotation. And when you have a trio of Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, and Mitch Keller as your top 3 in your rotation, and they're all on, that can win series for you. And that's what we're hoping to see moving forward, especially from the offensive side of things, is that when we do get these good starts from Mitch Keller, Jared Jones, and Paul Skeens, that they are wins. And more often than not, they should be turning into wins. Next on the show, I want to talk about why this pitching staff will only get better because of what we saw from some other folks like Luis Ortiz and Bailey Falter, and with what's here right now and how they'll get better, as well as what is on the way next on Locked On Pirates. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com right now for all of your betting needs because, folks, hockey started last night. Postseason baseball is on. I actually have it on right over here. The Tigers are up on the Guardians 2-0. So you can go live bet on that game on FanDuel if you want. Of course, we have football for about 49 days straight, college and pro, and basketball is right around the corner. And folks, FanDuel especially is here for you because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet because FanDuel is here for you for all of your sports betting needs, and they are America's #1 sports book for a reason. So go to the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com right now to get all your betting needs going with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Today's episode is also brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply because GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can get all-in pricing on GameTime by toggling the all-in pricing feature. It'll show you your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, and GameTime's lowest price guarantee will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, and your purchase is always covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off, and download GameTime today for all of your ticketing needs. What time is it? It's game time. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. After you listen to this show, make sure you go check out Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan because he's giving you all of your news and analysis of everything going on in the playoffs right now. The Padres have a chance to close things out today. The Tigers have a chance to go up 2-1. There's a lot going on. The New York Mets with the Grimace Energy have a chance to go up and into the NLCS. So Sully will have all of his analysis and thoughts on everything going on in baseball on Locked On MLB. So a large reason why I wanted to discuss the starting pitching staff to start things off this year was because you really look at why this staff was so good and what came together with this staff. And one of the biggest surprises that we really got this season was out of Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz, folks, didn't even come into the season thinking he was going to start. He started the season as a bullpen arm, a long relief bullpen arm, was used sporadically as an opener, excuse me, folks, as an opener, and was doing it very efficiently. Like even before he became a starter, he had a 3.45 ERA prior to his first start on June 26th against Cincinnati. And what we were seeing from Luis Ortiz this year, even before he was starting, you saw the velocity come back, which could be a credit because he didn't have to pitch as many innings as he was as a starter. His command was a lot better. We'll get back to that in a moment. And really and truthfully, he just looked more confident on the mound than he has in quite some time. And you were looking at what Luis Ortiz was able to do after he had that start against the Cincinnati Reds. Remind you, he struck out 7 Reds across 6 innings while allowing just 1 earned run in that time. And he never looked back. I mean, he had a 1.75 ERA in July and 4 starts and 5 appearances, which included 20 strikeouts to his credit, kind of showcasing what he was doing in 2022 when he rose through the system, got a little mini look at the end of the year came into 2023 and was supposed to be a big part of what the Pirates were doing in 2023, but he managed to do really good things because after July, he had a 4.19 ERA in August, a 3.97 ERA in September, and he collected 19 or more strikeouts in July, August, and September. So he really became a very, very good option to have in the back end of the rotation. And not only that, but I also think he earned a spot because of what we were able to see from his pitching arsenal, because he added a cutter this year. The cutter did get beat up just a little bit, but what I think that cutter was able to do was make his fastball a more lethal pitch, and it was a pitch that we were all mesmerized by when we were first learning of Luis Ortiz and what he was able to do, and his fastball dominance returned because opponents slashed 187, 209, and 331 with a XWOBA of 308 against his fastball this year, whereas in 2023, opponents slashed 383, 371, and 704 with an XWOBA of 520. So massive improvements from the fastball, and that is Luis Ortiz's main pitch. That is the pitch that is going to be his make or break pitch throughout his entire MLB career, be it as a starter, be it as a reliever, be it wherever he is and whatever he's doing. That is going to be the pitch that is going to make the difference for Luis Ortiz. And even better, not only with just the fastball, he brought down allowing hard contact massively this year, dropping his hard hit rate from 49.1% to 37.7%. So you got the command back, you got the velocity back. You saw that his fastball was not only coming back as a prime pitch, but it was getting virtually unhittable at certain points. And the XWOBA number dropped considerably. The hard hit percentage dropped considerably. Even the other pitches in his arsenal were doing really well. But exiting 2024, it's hard to not imagine that Luis Ortiz has a spot in this rotation going into next year. And you start to see the dominoes continue to go down because now you're already talking about having a lethal trio of Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, and Mitch Keller. Then you have a guy in Luis Ortiz who was just dominant at times this year as your fourth starter. Now, I don't like putting numbers on starters because then you're starting to say, well, this guy has to start here and then here and here and here, because we obviously haven't seen that. But if you can have 1 to 5 and go really good and have consistent starters that are doing really good things for you, folks, that is a lethal thing to have. And there are a lot of teams that with just those 4 would really gladly put themselves in the Pirates' shoes as far as what pitching is concerned. And this is before I even mentioned one of the other big surprises of 2024, which is Bailey Falter, who from the fan base was as good as gone before the season even began, especially when Jared Jones debuted, because a lot of people were saying, well, let's stick Jared Jones in, take him out, let's put Ortiz back in the rotation. Boom. And it didn't work out that way. So Falter was there. People already had kind of a sour taste in their mouth about him being there, but he really shut a lot of people up this year because he had a 4.43 ERA across 28 starts in 142 and a third innings. And that innings count, mind you, was the second most on the roster just behind Mitch Keller. So what does that mean? Well, it means that he was giving the Pirates a massive edge as having another consistent pitcher on the roster, especially with having to manage the innings of Paul Skeens and Jared Jones and even Luis Ortiz to a degree. But Falter just was good this year. And I don't know why people weren't talking about it enough, because what he was able to do was just good baseball from a pitcher. He posted the highest strikeout total of his career, collecting 97 strikeouts this season, which was 23 more strikeouts higher than his previous career high. His 1.29 whip was the second best mark of his career when he starts more than 10 games. And he surrendered the lowest opponent average of his career with 260 opponents average. That's huge. That's massive. Because you had a southpaw that was giving you consistent innings, giving you strong innings, and there were times where Bailey Falter just looked flat out dominant, folks. And it was a good thing to see. And on top of this, you guys know I love my advanced analytics. He didn't jump off the page with anything except his extension, which was within the 99th percentile at 7.3. But when you post 2 sub 3.0 months from your starter, you get that. And then he's also a guy that remains in the rotation for most of the season due to the Jared Jones injury or the Marco Gonzalez injury or Martin Perez getting traded. And he's that consistent for you and making an impact. And you're arguably saying he's your fifth best starter. That's why the Pirates pitching staff is in a good place, because you're looking at guys like Luis Ortiz and Bailey Falter who are hardly even talked about because of just how good the trio at the top is. And that's why this group is so good, because not even only that, folks, you got more on the way. You have more coming with top prospects. And we're going to talk about those top prospects and some of the biggest positives as to why this rotation is so set up in a good way to finish off today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app, because this episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Why don't you go explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about? I'm back in Savannah where I lived for 7 years, and I'm even learning things thanks to Booking.com, because Booking.com has bed and breakfast, hotels, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. And you might just find your perfect stay, even if it's in your baseball rival city during the postseason. Maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition stadium cuisine, and Booking.com's wide variety of choices across the U.S. will let you go incognito wherever you want to go. Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your home teams or even your rival stadiums, and the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Make sure you go to Booking.com right now to find that cute resort, that cute bed and breakfast, or that awesome hotel. Booking.com. Booking.yeah. And welcome back, everybody, to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network. To all of my loyal third segment listeners and my everydayers, thank you so much for tuning into the show, as you always do, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day, where we're talking starting rotation to begin the 2024 Player Review Series. And I was already talking about what's here, and what is going to be on the way is almost as intriguing as what is already here, because I could see a world where the starting rotation of Skeens, Jones, Keller, Ortiz, and Falter is what they enter 2025 with. But it is interesting to think about the other potential players that could make their way to Pittsburgh in 2025. You look at a guy in Mike Burrows, who made his MLB debut. Friend of the show, by the way. We've interviewed him before. If you search Mike Burrows Locked On Pirates, you'll find it. It was an awesome interview that we had with him a while back. Big recovery from Tommy John surgery for Mike Burrows. Awesome to see him debut. Awesome to see him live out his dream. And I really, really think he could be a guy that can make an impact on this rotation or the bullpen at worst. But we'll see what they decide to do with him. Same thing kind of goes for Johan Oviedo. Johan Oviedo, much like Burrows, missed an entire season due to Tommy John surgery. They're saying he could be ready for spring training going into next year. We'll see how that all rolls out, and we'll see if he can make his way back. Let's not forget that Johan Oviedo had a very strong season in his career, in his debut season as a full-time starter. Lots to kind of dabble into, though, as innings count and why he wasn't shut down late in the year, and then obviously ends up having to have surgery probably because of that. But Johan Oviedo, if he can come back and be a massive player and be kind of the same guy he was, who's to say he doesn't make his way to back to the majors in 2025 and be a real threat to this rotation? Then you look at the prospects, and we know that these prospects don't always pan out. We know that these prospects struggle sometimes when they get up here, i.e. Mitch Keller, perfect example, i.e. technically Jared Jones later on in the season. But right now, folks, 5 of the top 8 prospects in the Pirates top 8 are pitchers. The highlight, Bubba Chandler. We know what Bubba Chandler is about. There's a real shot that Bubba Chandler makes his debut next season and becomes a very, very big player in this rotation. A lot of people have high hopes for him. The ceiling is very high for a guy like Bubba Chandler. Then you look at Braxton Ashcraft, who a lot of people thought might debut this year. Didn't. Had late season injury issues. We'll see how those carry over into next year. Very talented kid. I personally see him as more of a reliever than a starter. That's just me, but things can change. We don't know what their plan is with a guy like Braxton Ashcraft. Then you're looking at guys like Thomas Harrington, who has a lot of upside. Anthony Solometto, who I got to see pitch in person for the first time in Altoona this year. He's another guy that I think can make a strong impact on this team. Then you look at Hunter Barco. They all have strides to make to get to the majors, and I'm not saying that they can't be players in 2025 that you look at and potentially see in the starting rotation at some point, but I think it would take a lot. I think they have some strides they need to make. I think there's a lot they need to do to make up. But what you're starting to see here, and what, if you're keeping up with what's going on, you already have Skeens, Jones, Keller, Ortiz, and Falter. You're then talking about the potential of Mike Burrows. You're talking about the potential of Johan Oviedo, potentially a Bubba Chandler at some point, and then all the other prospects I named. This is before they even maybe decide to go get a starter in free agency or trade, which despite all of this, they could still do. Teams need an array of pitchers nowadays, with injuries, with fatigue, with just flat out needing the innings to be thrown. You need all the pitching you can get. And the Pirates have a ton of depth right now with this pitching staff. They have so many options that they could look forward to. And when somebody goes down with injury, eventually these prospects that we're talking about are going to mature enough to where they can come up and pitch. And you're going to have some very good pitchers in AAA that just literally cannot get time because of how good this rotation is right now. And there's beauty in that, because that means that the Bubba Chandlers and the Braxton Ashcrafts and the Mike Burrows of the world are just going to have to flat out play their way into the rotation. They're not just going to be handed these spots. And there's beauty in that. And that's a major positive, because you now have a youthful, strong, high upside pitching staff that has depth behind it, so that the injuries might not even feel as bad when they do inevitably happen. And that is massive. And this starting pitching group will be the best group the Pirates have going into 2025. It will be the group that will eventually propel them into the playoff conversation at some point. The offense, of course, has to produce too, but this pitching staff is that good to where it can carry this team for stretches at a time, and that is a major commodity to have. Folks, thank you so much for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. Follow me on socials at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can find the show on all of your podcast platforms and YouTube. Like, subscribe, leave a review, comment, leave all the positives here, because we are here to give you Pirates news whenever you need it. My name's Ethan Smith. Have a wonderful Wednesday evening. See you late tomorrow. Till then, see you on the flip side.